You know, many drivers drive too fast in the slow corners and too slow in the fast corners. After all, it's the fast ones that are scary, right? And that's why I'm talking with Colin Braun again in this episode of the Speed Secrets podcast. On the road again. If you want to be faster in the fast stuff, listen up. And as usual, when recording on the road, the audio is not perfect, but you won't want to miss what Colin has to say. Hey, welcome to another episode of Travels with Colin Braun. We're driving from Frankfurt Airport to Spa. And Colin and Naj are racing in the Michelin Le Mans Cup Series this weekend. So this is going to be a blast. Colin, what do you think so far? The countryside's pretty nice.
Yeah, beautiful drive so far for sure. It's definitely a really nice picturesque setting. Should be, a good weekend, I think. Obviously, going to Spa is going to be really, really exciting. A track I've never been to, but I've seen a lot of footage and obviously know of its history and how cool it is. And one of my, I think, tracks that I'm probably most looking forward to going and driving.
I'm pretty sure that by the time you leave, you're going to go, this is my favorite track in the world. And if not the favorite, it's going to be at least in the top three for sure. It is just, well, maybe I shouldn't be setting those expectations so high. But I mean, it's so cool because it's got the old character, but it's modern. You know, like there's proper runoff room and that kind of stuff. But big fast, and then of course Eau Rouge, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna love it. It's really, really cool. And I think, whoa, speaking of fast, we just got passed by some Porsche, something or other.
And we're flat out.
I'm flat out in the Fiat here, so this is it. Sorry. And actually, Cole, I want to get your thoughts on fast corners. You've been on a tear in IMSA lately. So Watkins Glen, second place. Mossport, Road America wins. Laguna Seca, podium again. And some big fast corners in those tracks. And your pass on Jordan Taylor going to turn 8 in the couple laps to go at Mossport was, an example of a fast corner. And I've had a lot of people go like, how did Colin know the car would stick? and it just, so let's talk a little bit about how do you approach a fast corner?
That's a good question. I mean, I think really depends on what kind of car you're in as well. Obviously, the car I'm driving this year in IMSA, the Oreca LMP2 car, makes a ton of downforce, a ton of stick. And so, finding that limit when the car makes that much downforce is more challenging, and I think takes a bit more confidence and just commitment than in other kinds of cars that I've driven for sure. And so, yeah, I mean, part of it's just having the confidence and, commitment that you think it's going to stick and making it just kind of making it through the corner, right? And, it takes seat time and just trying to build that repetition and confidence, and grip, confidence, and all of that, I think, in the car. I mean, unfortunately, I wish there was some great, amazing secret that I could tell you, but I think so much of it just comes down to being comfortable with the car, moving around at the edge of making that much grip. And one of the things that I think is great about maybe modern day, or maybe the Oreca in specific, downforce cars is you can still drive them really aggressively even in fast corners, and they don't just get sideways and snap and lose all the downforce and spin out and fall off the edge of the earth. And so I think that's what makes the P2 cars really fun to drive, the DPI cars fun to drive. I mean, you can see other guys when you're racing with them, getting sideways, really hustling through these fast corners in 5th, 6th gear, and still having the downforce and the grip to be able to slide the car in these fast corners.
So, when you have a fast corner, turn 8 at Mossport, turn 10 at Watkins Glen, the carousel.
Turn 10 flat in the LMP2 car, by the way, is pretty incredibly fun, I have to say.
And, I mean, the kink at Road America.
Yeah, that's flat on the outlap. But a lot of fun. I mean, just...
And then turn 6 at Laguna Seca. fast corner, tricky because it's got kind of the elevation changes and everything. So fast corners, and I think, the approach, there's a technique though to fast corners, right? Like one approach can be just stove it into the corner and then deal with it. And the other can be, if you're going to have to make a speed adjustment, do it a little earlier so that then you're on power going through the corner rather than kind of doing that lift and maybe a brake, if you got to do a brush of the brake or something, doing it just as you enter the corner and upset the car. And are you adapting? Are you thinking about that, or are you just?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think for sure thinking about it and trying to think about what kind of corner it is and what sort of corner or straightaway it leads into. So your turn 8 at Mosport example is one where I think rifling the car in there really, really deep, hustling it in as hard as I can, and then kind of gathering it up in the exit is the best, because you go into turn 9 and it doesn't really matter your run from 8 to 9 so much as the speed you can gain by going really deep and aggressive into turn 8. And then your turn 6 at Laguna example is a perfect example of one where I think making that speed adjustment a little bit sooner, getting the car a little more stable through the center and able to get back to the throttle helps you, because you have such a long run from turn 6 uphill all the way up to the top of the corkscrew, where that exit speed and time is more important, I think, to the overall lap time than turn 8 at Mosport.
Okay, so get out of the Oreca for a minute, and you're driving a production car in those corners. The kink then is no longer the kink of Road America, is no longer just a no-brainer flat.
Right.
Is it a stove it in corner, or is it a do a little speed adjustment before and be on power?
I think the kink for me is a little bit of a speed adjustment a little bit before, but early back to throttle. I find in production cars, I find in the Oreca, I find in most cars, I think, for me, being on throttle a little bit through these fast corners helps settle the back of the car, helps just make the car more comfortable driving through. And it's not just for comfort, but it's to get the car to be quicker through there, because you have it a little bit more under control. You can know where you're going, you're on the throttle. It seems to settle the whole car down and let you carry a little more speed. And so I think that kind of technique bodes well, in more so in production cars than it does in the Oreca. The Oreca, you can throw it around a little bit more and not have such a massive loss in speed, where I think in these particularly lower horsepower production cars, the rolling speed and carrying speed and being back to the throttle and those kind of things is quite important. And I think balancing the platforms of these production cars is quite important to being able to carry and roll speed through a corner. And so I think if you stove the thing in and it's all hunkered down on the nose and it's moving around, it's really uncomfortable to drive, and it's hard to get back to throttle and have any sort of good exit.
And that's as we try to go faster, it's kind of almost, I was going to say human nature, but maybe it's driver nature. Well, I'm going to brake later, and I'm going to try to drive it in deeper, and we think that's going to get us speed, but then we've upset the balance of the car, the platform, and everything, and it's actually made it worse, right? But there's a similarity there between a production car and an aero car, but for different reasons, right?
Absolutely.
An aero car, you want the floor flat, because that's what it's maximizing the most downforce, right?
And I think the production car, you want to manage the weight, obviously, the weight transfer, how it sits and loads the tire, and I think the ability to be able to use the brake on release and how you load the car on that early sort of entry phase of the corner in either a production car or a prototype car with a big flat bottom and all of that is really important to how you kind of get through the rest of the corner. I think the smoother you can be, the more gentle you can be kind of loading and being smooth with the car, the better sort of either platform you have in a prototype car, or the easier and the more gentle you load the tire and kind of set the car into the corner. In a production car, I think it just allows you to carry more speed. And so for me, I think one of the things I focus on in a production car is trying to get off of the brakes sooner and letting the car roll a little bit through the corner. And by getting off sooner and smoother, that's kind of one way of not stoving the thing and braking later and having it all hunkered down on the nose and you know, uncomfortable and on the edge to drive. I feel like it's a little easier to kind of release the brake a little sooner, roll some more speed through the corner, and find lap time that way. And then if you end up really getting off the brakes super early, then you can move your brake zone in a little bit deeper and, you know, still have that kind of semi-early brake release. But it's a good way to cheat yourself into finding where the real late braking point is for kind of a fast corner without committing in there, driving it in super deep, realizing, wow, I'm really deep and this is really scary, jamming the brake on and having the thing be all out of shape, you know. So I kind of pick an earlier brake point, and then I start to work on my brake release point, rolling speed until I kind of find that good ground of, you know, min speed versus back to full throttle, and then chip back away at moving the brake point back in deeper to kind of match that release point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and obviously that would, in a slow corner, you wouldn't be coming off the pedal as early because you're going to get the car to rotate more. But because you don't have to change direction so much in that fast corner, that's why you're able to get away with that. And yeah.
And I'm thinking, you know, about a corner. I've just recently done some coaching in Ferrari Challenge cars, which are production cars, pretty quick production cars, but still pretty heavy. And I'm thinking about a corner like Turn 1 at Road Atlanta was a place where that technique was working really good, because if you drove it in too deep, initially you'd get it all loaded up on the front of the car, the back would be up, it would be really uncomfortable turning in, and you felt like, oh, I can't carry any more speed in the corner because the car is loose on entry. And as soon as you started to brake a little bit earlier and realize, wow, I need to use less brake pressure, release the brake a little bit sooner, and roll through the corner, the whole corner became more stable. You could roll more speed in, and then you started to go, wow, I'm braking too early, and then you could start to move the brake point in, keeping the pressure low and keeping that brake release point kind of early so that you're rolling the speed through the corner without having the thing all pitched on the nose and loose on entry. It's one of those where you had to kind of walk yourself to that point instead of just plunging off and going, I got to brake after the end of the wall on the left-hand side into Turn 1 at Road Atlanta, and if I can't, I'm going to literally spin the car out on entry because I've got so much brake pressure and the thing is so pitched.
Well, and that's that classic case of a driver focusing on so much on the, I got to brake there, you know, rather than where do I need to finish and where do I need to end my braking, what do I want the car to do when I'm turning in, and adjusting that where you start braking off of that, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you taught me early on, was focus on that brake release point more than anything else. And then, you know,
I think you taught me that.
I don't think so. I don't know.
I always say that we stumbled on it together.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, that brake release point's important, but then you start to get into the small mechanics of like how you release the pedal and how you load the tires and how you load the car and how you time the turn of the steering wheel for what the balance of the car is. And, you know, you get into Turn 1 at Road Atlanta, for example, and you use too much brake pressure and the car gets too loose on entry. The next time you use less brake pressure, you know, and now you're like, oh, it's not turning. So you got to find that happy medium balance of enough brake pressure to get the car pitched enough to make front grip, but not too much where it stands on the nose and gets loose in. And that's where that, you know, finite feel comes in, and repetitions and lap after lap after lap of kind of chipping away at it. And I think the more confidence you have, the quicker you can find that limit, and the more you have to sneak up on it if you're not as confident in, look, no matter what happens, I can bail myself out of this situation.
So a bunch of years ago, I was coaching. There were two well-paid pro drivers driving a production-based GT car, and we were at Sebring. And one of them, you know, went out. They both had done enough laps, and they were good, competent, good lap times. But one guy ended up going about a half a second quicker than the other one. And, you know, I looked at the data, and, you know, kind of almost surprising where that time came from was actually the faster driver braked lighter. Didn't, even going into like turn 7 into the hairpin, wasn't braking as hard. And it was just keeping the whole platform less standing up on his nose.
Yeah.
And it kind of surprised me, by braking a little bit lighter. He didn't brake a lot sooner, but it was just a tiny bit. But it was enough to keep the car flatter, more balanced. And then, he then carried, a mile an hour more or something into the corner. So it kind of surprised me just how much of a gain. And that added up to half a second at Sebring.
I can see it. I sometimes look at my own data and I go, turn 1 at Sebring is a great example. Like, you look at how little brake pressure you use in a prototype car, and you go, man, I should try to brake deeper because I'm giving up a ton of brake pressure here. Let's say we're using 1,000 pounds of brake pressure normally on a hard stop, and here in turn 1 we're using 200 pounds. Common sense would tell you, well, I could probably use 400 pounds and brake 50 feet deeper, and that's got to be faster. And then you try to go out and do it, and just with the aerodynamics and the way these cars work, it just doesn't seem to go as good. You just can't carry the speed. It's just not as comfortable. You can't roll the speed through. So I can totally understand that story.
And it was interesting because this was in a non-aero car.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in a production car, same thing, right?
Yeah.
You're going to use probably more brake pressure in turn 1 at Sebring in a GT car, but still the same thing. You just look at the comparison between a heavy brake zone and a lighter brake zone, faster corner, and I always go, gosh, I should use more brake pressure.
Right.
And brake later. Physics would tell you that you should be doing that, and it just doesn't seem to play out that way.
Right. So let's go back to the having confidence, because it'd be great. Hey, everybody, be more confident. but I think it's fear, it's self-preservation, it's anxiety, it's all those things that we go through in those big fast corners, and if you go in too fast into a 50 mile an hour corner, it's gonna get a little messy, but you're gonna collect it.
Right.
You have enough time. The car slides around. You have enough time to catch it. Whereas you go into a corner. What was your speed going into turn 8 at Mosport?
You're flat out in 6th gear, turning in flat. You've got to be 165, I would say.
So, if the car can take, let's say, 160, and you go in there at 163, there's not a whole lot of time to go, oh, I'm going to have to catch it here, right?
Yeah. You got to be processing pretty quick, I would say, yeah.
Right. So is that just seat time for you, do you think?
It's a good question.
What's telling you? Is it knowing that, okay, if it happens, I have enough data in the database up here to know that, okay, if it happens, the front end's going to push or the back end's going to come around. So I'm already prepared for what it's going to do. I'm ready for it. Do you think any of that's going on? I know probably not, certainly not at a conscious level.
Nah, but I think you'd be, I think some of it for me is just, I have enough confidence in my ability to catch the car at a good speed, because I've done it a few times and I've always, gone away from it going, wow, this car, you can really overdrive and still catch as long as you're quick enough to catch it, I think. And then that gives you more confidence the next time to be like, oh, I can step over the edge a little tiny bit and catch it, and it's okay. And I think it's having a bit the ability to step over the edge by half a mile an hour or a mile an hour, and not step over the edge by 8 miles an hour,
right,
and not catch it, because no one's going to catch it. Whoever your favorite race car driver isn't going to catch an 8 mile an hour over the limit. But if you're half mile an hour, 1 mile an hour over, and you're quick and you're ready, boom, you can catch it, and it's okay. And so for me, doing that a handful of times, then you start to go, you know what? I can roll in a little more speed. If I turn in and it's a little loose, I can catch it. If it's a little pushy, I can catch it. I'm kind of ready for either or. But I think it's maybe more so your ability to manage the difference of speed than it is just your overall confidence. I wouldn't be able to go in and say, oh, I could take this corner 5 miles an hour quicker. I just kind of have a gut feel for, okay, whatever I'm going to do, release the brake a little sooner and just roll in a little more speed, and I think it's going to be fine. And working just in that small window of never too big over or too big under, I think lets you gain your confidence.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, the drivers that I've worked with through the years, the best ones have that ability to set that speed. They're really good. Their speed sensing ability is really accurate. And like you said, they can tell the difference between half a mile an hour, a mile an hour. Whereas I think I was going to say less experience, but sometimes it's not just experience, but maybe a lesser skilled driver. Yeah, I mean, it's going to vary from 3 miles an hour, 8 miles an hour, whatever, right?
And I think that's the trouble. I think you go, okay, I'm going to go harder here, and you drive the thing to the corner 5 miles an hour too quick than what you've done the last lap, and it just either scares you and you're not ready for it and you're not quick enough to catch it, or no one would catch it because you were within 2 miles an hour of the limit, but you're not quite sensitive enough to be able to go just 2 miles an hour quicker, and you go 5 miles an hour quicker, and you end up getting yourself, almost reverse confidence, right? You go, oh, I'm never going to do that again. And it almost knocks your confidence down, right? And so finding that happy medium and walking that line is tough, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is that, we'll use the term, you scare yourself.
Right.
And then you go, oh, I'm not going to do that again. And so you never go that speed ever again, right? Or you never even try to get close to it because you've been there.
And it was scary.
You cheated death once and got away with it.
Right.
So there's that part of it. The other thing that I've seen a lot of is when drivers get into that moment when the car does start to slide, and it's almost like they're afraid to turn the wheel to catch it. And maybe it's that whole, and I'm guilty of it, saying, smooth is fast and everything. And sometimes drivers are a little too afraid to turn the wheel, and sometimes you need to have some quick hands to catch it.
Well, I was going to say, one thing that I like to do myself is always have a little bit of movements in the steering wheel. Not these really big sliding catches, but little small movements, almost checks of how much grip I have. And so, I get into a corner, take turn one at Atlanta, for example, and everything feels pretty good and it all feels secure, and so I just add a little bit of steering wheel turn in the middle of the corner and see if the car turns or see if the nose of the car slides, and that kind of helps me gauge how much room I have to find the limit. If as soon as I turn the steering wheel, feel the front end slide, well, I'm pretty darn close to being right at the limit there for the front tires. If I turn the wheel and the car turns better, turns more than I expected it to, well, I'm probably not rolling enough speed because, I'm clearly under the limit, because when I added some more steering input, boom, the car turned. And so I think having that little reactive, sort of proactive steering wheel kind of checks and balances, I think helps me find the limit and helps me calculate how close to the limit I am, because you may drive around for your whole life 1 mile an hour under the limit and never really realize, if you don't do a couple of those little steering wheel checks or kind of get the car where it's got some sort of feel to it, that you're not right under the limit, or you're not 50 miles an hour under the limit, right? How do you find that out? And I think that's where having those little steering wheel movements and having the car kind of move around is important. And if you can't do it by carrying the right amount of speed and being right on the edge, you can sort of lower that perceived limit by using these little steering wheel adjustments to kind of see what goes on.
Like I'm doing right now?
I'm not going to say how fast we're going.
Well, we're on the Autobahn. We've got about,
fair enough.
Oh, we got somebody pulling out in front of us. But we hit 184 there. That's pretty good downhill.
That's kilometers, though.
Yeah,
kilometers.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll get out 120s. I'm having to slow down on the Autobahn, so now's a good time to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Track Attack. Hey, I've created several articles and seminars and webinars and entire books on how you can become a better driver by focusing on yourself. And it's all true. But at some point, it's just as valuable to compare yourself with other drivers. Drivers that are faster, and even drivers that are just as fast or maybe even slightly slower. Why? Well, because this can open your eyes to completely different ways of thinking about your driving. Unfortunately, though, until recently, being able to compare your data with another driver was reserved for teams with several drivers or individuals who were determined to figure out how to make this work, because it's not for the faint of heart or those lacking a data science degree. That's all changed with Track Attack, where anyone can import data from all the major logging systems and even smartphone apps, and sharing is literally a click away. You can share with anyone whether they are on Track Attack or not. You can even create teams and share with a group of people, and even have private teams if you want to keep things top secret. That is one of the reasons Track Attack is my official software analysis platform for speed secrets. So sign up for Track Attack at www.trackattack.io for free. Yep, it's free. And then, if you want, use the code SPEEDSECRETS to get a 30% discount on the premium membership by using the discount code SPEEDSECRETS as one word. That's SPEEDSECRETS as one word for a 30% discount on the premium membership. Okay, let's get back up to speed with Colin. Okay, and that's a really great point, but I also want to, I've had drivers say to me, oh, I see race drivers moving the wheel, so I get on the track and I move the wheel back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They're like, well, I'm testing the limits, and yeah, it's not a deliberate shake the wheel back and forth kind of a thing. It's just,
I think you've seen race drivers probably just that shaking the wheel is when you are right on the edge of grip and you've got a little push and a little loose and you're just right balancing the car. What I'm talking about is just a little bit of almost a pressure on the wheel that you kind of put on the steering wheel to see if the car turns. It's not any big back and forth. It's just one little motion, like you're in the middle of turn one and you just pull a little more pressure and see if the car turns or if it slides.
Would that show up in the video? Like, will you see your hands doing that?
Probably not really, no. Okay. I would say not really. I would say you might see me get, if I'm not, within an inch of the apex curb, you might see me bump the apex curb or get right to the apex curb and then straighten my hands up a little bit or whatever if I'm under the limit. If not, you might just see my hands turn and the nose just wash a little bit more.
So you're going to see corrections in the wheel, but it's not like you said, it's pressure in the wheel. I think that's the difference. And I've had drivers send me in-car video, and I'm kind of almost like, well, why are you shaking the wheel back and forth?
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm testing the limits.
No,
actually, that's not really helping.
No.
But you're talking about just putting a little pressure there to kind of go, okay, is the car going to respond or not going to respond?
And I'm talking about doing it one time in the corner, not multiple back and forths. Just next time through, and you're steady state, and you're like, yeah, this is just like the last time. This is at the limit. Just add that little pressure, and sort of see what happens, and that gives you a great indicator of how close to the limit you are.
Now, when you did all your NASCAR stuff, oval track, that's kind of what it's all about, right?
Absolutely.
Big, long, sweeping corners, and you're just like, what's going to, if I tighten the wheel here, what's it going to do?
Yeah.
Am I going to drive it in the nose first in the wall or back end, right?
Spinning out. That was one of the places where, for me, it really clicked, and then I kind of brought some of that back to sports car racing in fast corners, and it definitely helps me find that limit, or at least know that I'm right at that limit. I'm never sitting there going, I wonder if I could carry more speed, because I've kind of already answered that myself without having to, I should carry more speed, and end up going, oh, shit, that didn't work out. That was too bad.
Right. And what are your thoughts on I was having this conversation actually with Tom Long.
Oh, yeah.
And recently, and we were talking about the whole thing of, a lot of drivers they're afraid that if they go over the limit, the car automatically goes rolls up in a ball, bursts in a ball of flame, and they, you've been watching too many bad race car movies or something, right?
Right.
A lot of times, and I was watching, really paying attention to the Formula One race at Spa, because we're coming here, and I kind of wanted to watch what they're doing. And it's amazing how many times you'd watch a Formula One driver go through a corner like Lesor's hairpin, and they'll wash a little wide. And they're trying to carry just a little bit more, or trying to get on the power a little sooner, or whatever, and they wash a little wide, but it's no big deal. Like, and I think the best drivers are not afraid of making mistakes.
We've talked about it before. I think the best drivers are better at recovering from their mistakes. I think sometimes maybe the best drivers make more mistakes. They just are able to recover from them quicker, but that's what lets them find the limits and find where the lap time is, by making those mistakes and still recovering and, getting back to work and continuing to make those mistakes. I mean, there's lots of times this year in the prototype car and in the middle of races where I've found myself going, ooh, I missed that apex by 2 or 3 feet. But, if I'm patient and kind of gather the car back up and get back on the throttle and don't make this mistake worse, I really haven't lost very much time. And sometimes you end up learning little tidbits out of those mistakes.
Yeah, it's amazing how many times you make a mistake and you go, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
Some of that worked.
That was good.
Yeah. I got to go make that mistake again.
But I think the biggest thing is being patient enough and confident enough in yourself to go, I can't make this worse. I'm not going to miss the apex by 2 or 3 feet. Then get back to the gas at the same point that I normally do. Drive the thing plumb off the corner through the weeds and come back onto the track, right? It's like, I made a little mistake. Okay, I've got to fix this. I'm going to be a little more patient. I got to get the car a little more rotated because I am 2 or 3 feet wider and I'm going to need to use that track out room. So patient, car rotated. Okay, boom. Now I'm back to the throttle and I've recovered from the mistake. I think far too often people go, I got to fix this. And then they end up just making it worse.
Right. And I think that, hey, I always get it, whatever. I'm back to full power by the apex, let's say. Well, now I'm wide and the car's all crossed up. I still get back to the full throttle at the apex. No, you can't do that.
Right.
You kind of got to go, I made a mistake. I'm paying the penalty here.
I'm going to fix it.
Yeah.
Patient, fixed. Okay, we're good.
And if you fix it the right way, you might have lost 2 or 3 tenths. Whereas if you try to get it all back, it might cost you a second.
Absolutely. And I mean, I am surprised, and it happens to me because I do make mistakes when I drive for sure. But I mean, I'll have times when I'm like, ooh, that was a mistake. And I end up looking down at my predictable in the car and it cost me half a tenth. Or, gosh, I didn't even notice any difference on the predictable. It's impressive. Right.
So, I've been sort of thinking about this, and I've been writing an article about this. In fact, part of my flight here, I wrote this article about this whole, the idea that, we're building our expertise, and in everything that we do, we want to get better. And I see a lot of drivers get better, and they kind of get to a plateau, and then they stay there. And I think what happens is we kind of get to that point where our expertise level almost stops us from wanting to experiment. And, I see this a lot with, I'm going to say, drivers that have a reputation. Let's say they're the old pro in the car club event, or, one of the senior drivers at a track day event or something, and people rely on, this driver is kind of a role model and setting an example and a mentor to a lot of other drivers. Well, that driver can't afford to make mistakes. So the driver kind of drives with the same level of expertise because they're afraid to experiment.
Right.
I think one of the things that I see the best drivers do is they're not afraid to try things because they know that they can try it and collect it up and carry on. So, I don't know. I'm trying to...
I can't wait to read the article.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Well, I can't wait to finish it. I'll finish it on the flight home. So
perfect.
But I think it's that... it's part of it is the confidence, knowing that I can get away with this. I can afford to carry a little bit more in this lap and see what happens. Like, I'm not gonna fall right off the track. I might run wide, but I'll collect it up and carry on.
And I think, again, it kind of goes back to a little bit of what we talked before, where I know if I'm going to really charge into a corner and be crazy, I'm going to carry an extra mile an hour of speed in, or a mile and a half of speed. And I know that if I carry that little bit extra speed, that I'm going to be able to gather it up. 9 times out of 10, and it's not going to be a big deal. And so I think, being able to really know how much extra speed you're carrying then gives me the confidence to go, I can fix this. If somebody slingshotted me into a corner 5 miles an hour quicker because I wasn't driving, I'm not sure that I would be able to fix it all the time. And so I think part of it is like, it's a 2-step thing, right? I have the confidence that I can catch it and I'm going to be okay, but I also have the confidence that I'm not going to miss it by 5 miles an hour. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I'm sitting here thinking, before I had a chance to watch the IndyCar race this past weekend. The show, by the time everyone's listening to this, it's going to be actually just a couple of days before the final IMSA race at Road Atlanta, Petit Le Mans. But we're recording this just days after the final IndyCar race. Right. And as you'd probably know if you watched that, we also got to watch the last bunch of laps of the NASCAR race at Las Vegas. And it was really interesting when Keselowski and Logano are kind of battling, go back and forth. And after a restart, they're going down the back straight side by side. And Keselowski just stove it into the corner like, holy wow.
Yeah.
Like with a ton more speed. And even like the announcers, I don't know who was announcing, but, drivers, and they were like, wow. Like they were shocked at how much speed he threw into the corner.
Yeah.
And you kind of go, well, why haven't you been doing that earlier? Like, why have you just saved it for that lap?
Right.
Did he just kind of will the car to stick that lap, or could the car, or is it just, saving the tires and saving things?
That's the thing too that I watched a bit of that as well, and I was surprised at the difference there. But you never know. Like maybe Logano was like, oh, I'm going to be on the bottom. I don't have the grip. I got to lift early. I'm going to try to get back at the top. I mean, maybe it was one of those kind of, the right place at the right time. So it looked crazy different, but maybe it really wasn't that much different than what normally Keselowski's been doing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah. But I think there's those times when, that happens, or like you talked about earlier, I passed Jordan around the outside in turn 8 at Mosport. I mean, sometimes it's just have the confidence and you're committed to, you came off at turn 2 at Vegas and Keselowski said, you know what, I'm not going to be side by side with Logano anymore. I'm driving this thing in. I'm going to slide up. It's going to be what it's going to be. I knew that was kind of my one move at Mosport to be able to pull off, and this was a really good run, and we have a bit of a torque deficit, and so, that was maybe the only chance I had at making the move stick around the outside, and I was just gonna make it stick or crash trying, and that was it.
Well, there's certainly something about when a driver has commitment.
Yeah.
It's like the car can tell. People talk about animals, right? They say a horse can tell when you're scared.
Right.
Like with me, when I'm around a horse, I'm terrified of those things, right? It knows, animals can tell. Cars can tell when you're committed. It says, okay, I'll back you up here.
Yeah, I think you've got to have, you've got to be committed, and you also have to have, maybe sometimes, I don't want to call it luck, but you have to have it go your way, because I've seen some committed drivers also end up in some big balls of flame, too. I can think back to, was it Sato trying to pass Dario Franchitti at the Indy 500 with a couple laps to go, committed to the inside, boom, that was that, right? Yeah. I mean, we see commitment not always work, too, I'd say.
That is true, yeah.
Sometimes commitment can't overcome physics, I guess.
Yeah.
That's why we love it.
But, and I always say, though, but do we know all the laws of physics yet? I don't think we know them all yet. We know most of them, maybe, or whatever. I don't know. If there's any physicists listening to the show, they can tell us.
Right in.
But it seems like, we don't know all the laws of physics yet. And that's why every now and then you see a driver, it's why Senna was always, idolized, because he seemed to do things in a car that physics said you couldn't do.
Absolutely.
But he made it work. And sometimes it's just that deep belief, like, I'm going to make this work.
Yeah.
And
I think sometimes it's that deep belief up against somebody that is like, man, that guy always makes it work. And so,
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know Keselowski's and Logano's history. I don't watch all the NASCAR races, but maybe Keselowski's always kind of the guy that makes it work, and Logano's always like, oh, not Brad again. This is going to be crazy. And so when Brad stoves it in there, it's not a surprise that happens, and Logano gives him a little bit, and that's what happens.
Yeah. It's, but it is, I don't know. It's interesting when you watch a driver drive with confidence.
For sure.
And you can see it. Like, you can watch the way the car is being driven, and obviously you have to have the skills and the technique to go along with that. I mean, what's that old saying? There are old brave drivers. There's no old brave drivers. There are only old dead ones, or something. I don't know. Or brave dead ones, I think it is. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, brave without skills and technique doesn't cut it. But if you put the two of them together, and by the way, I think skills and technique without confidence,
right,
you're not going to be good either.
Absolutely.
Well, you're going to be good, but you're not going to be
really, really good.
Yeah. You're not going to make a pass on the outside of turn 8 at Mosport.
Yeah, I mean, confidence is a big part of it. But yeah, like you said at the start of the show, wouldn't it be great if we could all just go be confident and buy some confidence and be confident?
Yeah, we should do that. We should develop
sell that. Yeah,
bottle of confidence. I want a bottle of confidence.
Maybe they could read your books, listen to your webinars. That gets you some confidence.
There you go. Yeah. Sure.
I think that's the thing to do, really.
Yeah. But it, again, I think it shows up in the fast corners more than it does elsewhere. But the same thing applies. I mean, you see guys get out of slower corners. I'm going to say slow to medium speed corners. I think the same kind of thing applies getting out of the corners too, right? It's that commitment to get into the throttle, full throttle, and then commit to it.
Yeah.
Stay with it, not start to wimp out partway.
Well, and I personally think, and you may disagree, but I think coming off of medium to slower speed corners, the center off part, the application of the throttle, the tracking onto the exit curve, the holding the car at kind of the limit, sliding, coming off the corner, I think is the easiest thing to do in all of our driving.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. Because at that point, you know what you've got.
Right. And the throttle pedal controls exactly what's going on, and the steering wheel helps set the direction, and it's pretty simple.
I mean, I've shared that quote, Mark Donohue, where he said, exiting a corner with the tires with the car at the limit is like tightrope walking.
Right.
But entering a corner at the limit is like jumping onto a tightrope blindfold.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is, because you're going and you're going, I don't know what I have.
Right.
Let's go find out.
Right. And that's where I think it's two different things. Like, you can be pretty confident coming off of a corner. I see a lot of newer drivers, less experienced drivers, confidence coming off a corner, but building and finding that confidence, figuring out the brake point, brake release point, rolling speed to the center, and then maximizing the middle of the corner to find out, is it quicker to roll more speed, be a little late to the throttle? Is it quicker to kind of V-style the corner, get it slowed, rotated early, back to full throttle? What's the quickest way to do it? I think that's where the real confidence element comes through, and is hard. That's where it's harder, I think, to gain the confidence in that section of the corner.
Yeah, for sure. And so recently I had Billy Johnson on, and we were talking about driving style.
Yep, I heard that part. I listened to it.
Oh, did you?
That was a good one.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I mean, his comment of a driving style limits you.
Right.
And
it's a good answer.
It's a good answer.
Seems like the perfect textbook answer to me.
I see where he's going with that.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of drivers, you can see that they do have a style.
Right.
But I think the best drivers, they adapt. I mean, yes,
I agree.
I think there are lesser experienced drivers who tend to drive all corners the same way.
Right.
They're always slow in, fast out, or they're always really fast in, not so fast out. And, one of the things, I describe your style is in slow to medium speed corners, I don't know of anybody that gets on the throttle, committed to throttle, getting out of the corner better than you do.
Right.
But in fast corners, I don't know of too many drivers that can stove it into the corner and make it work too. So,
yeah.
You can work both sides of the corner as well.
Well, and I think what Billy maybe was trying to say is, in a way, like, there's no style limits you, and I agree, style probably does limit you, but I think all drivers, even Billy probably has some tendencies, right? Like, for me, I have a tendency, like you said, I will be a little bit slower min-corner speed in a slower or medium speed corner, tend to be. And I'll be earlier back in the throttle, I tend to be, than I think what a normal pro-level driver does. And, that changes, right? I'm driving this year an Audi GT4 car in Pirelli World Challenge. That car really likes to have a lot of minimum speed rolled through the corners. It doesn't like that slow down, stop, point, and shoot kind of style. It likes to be rolled through even slower corners, even hairpins. And so I've had to adapt my style or change my tendency, I guess, to try to roll more speed. And that doesn't mean that I don't, because, well, that car doesn't fit my style. No, I mean, I change my style, I change my tendency. But when I first drive any new car and I jump in for the first 5 laps, my tendency or style is to slow it down, get it rotated, bang, back to early throttle. And so I think we all have a style or a tendency. And then I think the better we are, the more we're able to adapt our tendency or style to fit that kind of car. But I think we all kind of have some kind of inborn style, I guess.
Maybe you developed it based on the type of car you started in or whatever.
Absolutely,
and, that's kind of where it came from. But one of the things that I'm trying to think of, visually, one of the things that I think that you do well is you get the car in slow to medium speed corners, and I think it's why you're able to commit to throttle, is you get the car rotated well, and the car is pointing in the right direction that allows you to do that. I mean, it's pretty easy to say, well, just commit to the throttle sooner. Well,
right.
If I do, I'm going to spear the thing off the outside of the corner. Like,
right.
It just won't. But you've got the car pointed on an angle, and, it's that whole thing of you might apex at the exact same place that somebody else will, but what angle are you at when you're at that apex?
Absolutely. I mean, that was, for me, one of the big things, again, kind of going back to when I got into NASCAR, that Carl Edwards helped me a lot with. We would talk about, apexing in corners, and I remember being in Nashville, and that's a concrete track, and he was really good on concrete tracks, and I was like, Carl, what's the secret? I'm the new guy, where's the apex and all this stuff? And so we went out and actually ran some practice laps together, and he was like, man, you're doing great, you're at the same apex I am, but your angle's all wrong. And I was like, huh? I didn't even really get the concept of it. And so he sat down and talked me through it, because I never really thought about it much in sports car racing. I just thought more about apexes and that kind of thing. We know, I think it's been a newer thing where in sports car racing and road racing, we start to talk about the angle of the car at the apex. It's like another dimension, right? It's not just, well, I got to the apex, late apex, you said, and boom, I got there. But what angle is the car at when you get to that apex? And that's one of the things that I definitely think about and consciously, when I'm driving, kind of judge and think about and work on, as my subconscious is kind of doing its thing.
Yeah, because it's easy to say to a driver, well, you need to be on the throttle, and I'll get a lot of drivers that go, well, where should I be at full throttle in relationship to the apex? Should I be at full throttle at the apex? As early as possible, without having to then lift again. But I think, it's kind of that, well, how do you do that?
Right.
Because it's pretty easy to say, well, be at full throttle by the apex, or, 10 feet before, or whatever, 20 feet out, whatever that is. But if the car is not pointing in the right direction, you can't do it.
Even if you're at the right apex.
Yeah. So, like you said, it's another dimension, I think. And, hey, if this was easy,
we'd all be doing this.
Yeah. Or we'd all be bored and we'd go, enough of this. Let's go play golf or whatever.
Yeah, and I think going back to your earlier point, too, you talked about, guys that get bored and kind of reach that level. I mean, for me, I enjoy trying to figure it out and make mistakes, and how do we, get out of them and figure out how to make it where I didn't lose a whole ton, and can I use that the next lap to do something a little different that works. And so I find a lot of joy when I get to a certain level of driving a car where I start to explore and almost not poke the bear to be mean, but just explore and figure out what the next step is and what can find speed and that kind of thing. And I think that gives me a lot of joy, almost more joy having a sloppy lap that I drove well, and maybe on the outside nobody would even know, but on the inside I knew it was a sloppy lap, but I fixed it really well. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, and it kind of surprises me when I hear a driver say, I've kind of plateaued, I'm not improving, and it's well, how is that even possible?
Right.
Like, there's no way you could ever get to the point where it's like, well, that's it. I've learned everything there is to know.
I've finished the internet.
I figured it out. Exactly. Yeah. I got to the end of the internet. So, you can't do that. There's always more. But I think there is that fear. There is that apprehension. There's that whatever that's holding you back from trying things. And to be honest, I'm going to say, sometimes I think it's almost ego driven.
Right.
It's I'm a good driver, and
right.
But if I go and experiment and I start making some mistakes, I might not be thought of as a good driver anymore, and you limit yourself.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the other pet peeve sort of mine, and I'm not sure if this falls in line. Hopefully, you're not totally against this, but
I hope I am.
We'll have a good controversial chat. Yeah. But I think one of the big things that I really lean on that helps me in whatever kind of car I'm driving is having some sort of predictable lap timer that can show a plus or minus, because then when I do make those mistakes or I'm in experiment mode, I can quickly quantify in the car better or worse, and not just better or worse based upon an RPM that I've picked at the exit curve, but I can watch that predictable all the way down to the next corner and go, you know what, I gained 0.2 rolling min speed in the center of the corner, but I gave 0.3 up from the apex to the entry of the next corner, and so that wasn't worth the trade-off. And you can start to watch that number without being too distracted, obviously, but you can start to watch that number and really tune your driving kind of around that number and learn. For me, I can learn a lot quicker than, okay, now I got to go back and look at the data, and on lap 3, this and that and this and that. You can just get instant feedback for what you're doing.
No, you're wrong.
And it entices me to make mistakes.
No, you're all wrong. No.
Good. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, I think the lap predictor is a great metric, and I think it's a valuable metric. If you have the ability to use it the right way.
Right, absolutely.
And I think the only time that I would disagree with you is when a driver is overly focused on that, to the point where they're, they can go, I was up 0.3, and you go, well, why were you up 0.3 ago? I don't have a clue.
Well, and see, that's the thing, right? I do mine, and I go through the corner, okay, I'm going to do this. Boom, and I go, wow, 0.3 better. I can do more of that. Oh, next lap, 0.4 better. Great. Oh, I'm starting to do too much of that, and I'm giving up too much of this, and I'm starting to go slower. And so having that fundamental understanding, I think, is crucial. Yeah. So it's, all of those things, whether it's, RPM at the end of the exit or all the way down the straightaway, the predictable lap timer, all of those things it's feedback. And what is great about it is it's immediate. Absolutely. And I will say, I'm not good enough for me to go through a corner and go, wow, that was great. That was definitely way better. And be able to know that from entry all the way to the next corner, because I've been wrong oftentimes. When I go into a corner, I feel like way better. But you know what? I get to the exit and I feel like maybe I didn't get as good of a run. Well, how much time did I lose down the straightaway? Well, I don't know if I lost a tenth, 0.2, half a second, half a tenth. I don't know.
Right.
So that predictable helps me quantify it. And I think there's a lot of good, inexpensive, predictable lap timers, like an AIM Solo out there.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other things, but
now do it on your phone.
Oh yeah. Right.
There's just there's so much of that kind of stuff. And again, it's a useful tool. It's a form of feedback. You just have to be sure that it's not distracting you away from what you should be doing as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you got to manage that, and it works for most drivers, but not always. And sometimes the best thing you can do is turn it off, just go and drive, and then turn it back on, and then start to work away again.
Well, and I think I don't care about what the lap time says. I just care about the predictable bit. I'm not like driving to the lap time and whatever. I'm just looking at, does that help me or does that hurt me? Does that help me? Does that hurt me? And then I learn all that, and then you can put it together, and off you go.
Because it is interesting how many times you go, oh, that was so much faster.
Yeah.
And then you look at the predictive lap time or the lap time, and you go, oh, well, it actually wasn't.
That was terrible.
Yeah. Sometimes what feels fast isn't. Yeah. Well, Colin, I think are we getting off this exit here?
We are.
We're getting off at the exit because this is the exit to Spa.
Here we are.
We're just about going to whip up to the track here. Stavolo.
There we go.
Malmedy. Yes. We are almost here. So, let's wrap it up. Colin, thanks for, once again, sharing...
Anytime.
Well, partially makes the drive much more interesting, doesn't it?
It sure does. Keeps us awake, if nothing else.
Exactly. After whatever all-night flight, that is what we need. So, hey, thanks. Most importantly, you're going to Road Atlanta, last race, Petit Le Mans of the season. Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to keep at it.
Keep executing the way you have been.
We will.
And things will work out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Anytime. Thanks, guys.
Here's my speed secret for this week. The harder you drive, the more grip the tires have. Okay, there's a limit to this, but generally speaking, the faster you drive, the harder you lean on the tires, the more heat they'll build and they'll have more grip. This is especially true with race tires and really high-performance tires on a cold track. Yeah, it's hard to get heat in them sometimes, and it feels like you're driving around on ice until they're hot, but that's why you need to slide the car around and use the brakes a lot to build up heat in the tires. The more heat you get in them, the more they'll grip. The more they'll grip, the faster you can drive, which builds more heat, which generates more grip, and so on. It takes time to get used to driving fast on cold tires, so focus some practice time on doing just this. Hey, as always, thanks for listening, and especially for telling your friends about this podcast. I'll be back next week with another very cool guest. Until then, keep learning and having fun.